Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is April the 11th. It is the 101st day of the year. Just 264 days remain till the year is over with. Holidays and observances. It's National Barbershop Quartet Day. So go down to your barbershop and sing with them. It's National Pet Day. National Poutine Day. It's a Canadian classic dish. It's crispy fries, savory gravy, and gooey cheese curds, all mixed together. And what I guess would be known as a mess. Or Parkinson's Day. National Cheese Fondue Day. National Ranch Water Day. It's a refreshing blend of tequila, fizzy water, and zesty citrus. It's for those laid-back moments at family gatherings when everybody gets plastered and falls on the ground. It's National Submarine Day. National Marketing Operations Appreciation Day. National Louie Louie Day. National 8-Track Tape Day. I hadn't seen one of those in years. Poet and a Cupcake Day. National Living Donor Day. National Donate Life Blue and Green Day. National Library Week. National Wildlife Week. And National Discover National Parks Fortnight. Well, the border crisis continues. President Trump has threatened tariffs and sanctions on Mexico for stealing water from Texas farmers. Trump tells Mexico to give Texas the water they're owed under a decades-old treaty. The Mexican government is not, shall we say, enthusiastic about honoring that treaty. Well, there's been some bizarre discoveries at the Texas-Mexico border, including a monkey. 3 people got arrested. They had the monkey stuffed in a backpack. According to Jason Seffritz, Democrats made an error opposing Doge. The Doge opponents have been struggling to make a coherent case that it shouldn't be allowed. How dare anybody interfere with the graft the Democrats are getting? And we're talking about billions of dollars. How else can folks who by their own statements are broke when they get elected to public office and 4 or 5 years later they're worth $20-30 million? You're not getting that on $275,000 a year, let me tell you. Well, King Charles says he's not handing over the throne to Prince Williams. He keeps having to go in the hospital, and William is taking over more and more of the king's duties, but it's not getting the title yet. North Carolina professor who waged war on DEI at the university actually won. North Carolina State University changed its strategic plan after the professor filed a complaint. A social media star, Libby Dunn, has sparked a viral debate over the proper way to eat crawfish. And if you're not from the South, you probably don't know what that is. But she has sparked a culinary debate. A judge is going to rule over whether Mahmoud Khalil should be deported or not. I mean, the mere fact he has been pushing the destruction of Israel and leading revolts and sit-ins and what have you, that's just hijinks. Listen to his lawyers, which makes me little ashamed of the legal profession. I was a member of it until I told a judge that blacks had the right to representation, just like whites. And he assured me I was a traitor to my race and he'd see me out of the practice. And he got my then wife to help him. Well, Los Angeles DA has slammed the Menendez brothers for a bunker of lies ahead of the fight against reduced sentences. Los Angeles District Attorney Nathan Huckman opposes resentencing for the Menendez brothers. They killed their parents, and allegedly it was because they were being abused. Well, college baseball game has descended into a brawl in the 11th inning. Spring Hill and University of Mobile's brawl occurred as the season's winding down, and Spring Hill College and University of Mobile are two schools hoping to get a chance at the postseason in NCAA Division II. Intensity of the last few games of the 2025 season appeared to have added to the pressure of their game on Tuesday as things got out of control between players of both teams. Greg Gutfield came out on the fact that Tim Walsh has done nothing but demonize Minnesota. This is the guy who was going to be the vice president under Kamala Harris. Where an American woman's been arrested at the California immigration checkpoint. She was attempting to smuggle children into this country. Two Mexican girls, aged 10 and 12, were inside the car with an American woman who they profess not to know. Now, the House Republicans have pushed a nationwide concealed carry. As Trump says, the Second Amendment doesn't have any borders, and they want reciprocity. If you're licensed in one state, you can carry in another. Well, let's see. President Trump, by all accounts, has Iran cornered by following the Reagan doctrine. We'll see how that plays out. A Maine MAGA, that's Make America Great Again, parent was silenced at a school board meeting during a speech opposing trans athletes in girls' sports. And, it just baffles me no end that supposedly sane, logical people who sit on school boards don't see the difference between males playing in girls' sports and girls playing in girls' sports. It's just unbelievable. Supposedly it's all part of DEI, don't you know? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Males have the right to play in female sports. Well, Christina Ricci will never be the girl next door. She said happy people don't do anything interesting. She stars as oddball Misty Quigley in the psychological thriller Yellow Jackets. James Carville has declared identity politics is dead after the Clinton and Harris failures. He says nobody cares anymore, the Democratic Party, what gender you are, what race you are, and what ethnicity you are. They just want to win. And that's the purpose of elections. But unfortunately, in today's Democratic Party, you must be the right race, the right ethnicity, the right gender, when the average American doesn't care. Well, stroke, dementia, depression, shares 17 preventable risk factors. And if you manage to reduce these, the 17 risk factors that are shared by these two of the diseases include blood pressure, kidney disease, fasting plasma glucose, total cholesterol, alcohol use, diet, hearing loss, pain, physical activity, purpose in life, sleep, smoking, social engagement, and stress. But that's just part of living, folks. Well, Kamala Harris is weighing whether she's going to run for president again or be the governor of California. Personally, I think she should be sent into retirement. A Republican from New York aims to evict Democrats from the 20-year occupation of the New York governor's mansion. He's going to launch a 2026 campaign for governor. His name is Mike Lawler. He's going to decide by the middle of the year whether or not he's going to run. Well, a stepmother in Connecticut locked her child in the basement for 20 years. They're calling it abuse. Maybe she just didn't like him playing the TV at night. Convict on death row is concerned about the inhumane firing squad he's going to face. Well, let's see. Auburn's Bruce Pearl is named chairman of the U.S. Israel Education Association. Anti-Israel Stanford protesters charged in destructive 2024 campus building takeover. They don't seem to understand actions have consequences. Well, let's see what else we got. Dozens of ancient skeletons have been found in the heart of a bustling city. It was Brussels, Belgium. Archaeologists came across the remnants of an old cemetery located in a very busy part of the city. The remains date back to the Middle Ages. Archaeologists claiming they have found Noah's Ark, and they plan on digging it up. Well, a lot of journalists are coming forward talking about the fact that the media made an effort to cover up the fact that Biden was losing it. In fact, if it came down to cognitive status, the last 2 years, the lights were on, but nobody was home. All right. Well, for all of our Jewish listeners, tomorrow begins Passover, which is what is it, the Saturday before Easter, I think it is. All right, we've been talking about some of the world's most haunted hospitals. And hospitals are places you go for respite and peace and quiet when you need to recover from some type of physical or emotional injury. But what happens when certain occupants of those facilities never leave? We're going to start out at the University College Hospital in London. Now, when you consider its centuries of bloody and tragic history, it shouldn't be the least bit surprising to learn that the city of London is home to more reported ghost sightings per square mile than any other city in the world. Now, in this country, in my humble opinion, having done ghost tours for 20 years, prior to COVID, the most haunted city in this country is El Paso. There are accounts in London of shades and specters drifting through the halls of a lot of historic London buildings. In fact, those stories are commonplace. They're the ghosts of men and women who were both ordinary and extraordinary. Behind every ghost sighting, you can find a fascinating human interest story, and frankly, none is more so than the tragic tale of a young lady by the name of Elizabeth Church. Now, as the 19th century drew to a close, Elizabeth, who was referred to as Lizzie by most of her friends and family, was a nurse working at University College Hospital on Gower Street in the Bloomsbury area of the city. Her fiancé was admitted to the hospital as a patient, and by a tragic twist of fate, she was assigned to care for him as one of the wards there. And although it's not known precisely what his illness was, it must have been something that caused a great deal of pain, because Lizzie was directed to administer morphine to him in order to provide some relief. And having been in extreme pain myself and having to have morphine, oh, it's a wonder. Now, it's a very potent analgesic drug that is still widely used today. In fact, emergency paramedics quite often will administer it to patients to relieve pain. In fact, sometimes they administer it into the vein of a patient suffering from a heart attack, or maybe one who sustained severe burns, or somebody who was fractured a bone, or maybe dislocated a joint. But it is a drug that has to be given with caution, because it is if given too rapidly and too great an amount, it may not only drop the blood pressure to dangerous levels, it can also depress the respiration drive to such an extent the patient stops breathing and dies. Now, for here in the 21st century, those who administer morphine also have available a drug to counteract a morphine overdose. So if the patient reacts badly to the drug, there's something that can be done about it. Now, Narcan, as it's commonly known, wasn't invented until 1961. It's almost 70 years after Lizzie Church accidentally administered a fatal overdose of morphine to her intended husband. And unable to live with the guilt of killing the man she loved, she was overcome with grief and guilt and took her own life. Now, doctors and nurses working at University College Hospital in the decades since that time have been shocked to look up from their patient's bedside and see the apparition of a ghostly nurse hovering there in the background, staring back at them. The apparition wears period clothing and seems to be trying to convey a warning, one that all medical professionals would do well to heed, and that warning is, watch out for your drug dosing. Well, can it really be a coincidence that the mournful ghost of Lizzie Church is more often seen when a patient's just about to be injected with a pain-killing medication such as morphine? Curses are one of those things in which one either believes or doesn't believe, and most of us today tend to laugh them off as mere fodder for scary movies. But for those who do believe in them, curses are no laughing matter. More than 150 years, the framed portrait of an eminent surgeon by the name of Marcus Beck has been prominently displayed high on a wall at University College Hospital. Nursing staff at the hospital firmly believes that the painting was cursed, and that any unwary person who should sit underneath the painting and drift off to sleep would become seriously ill, in some cases, and never wake up again. Well, long before dark superstition grew to surround that painting, the surgeon's portrait was left uncovered overnight. Either a patient or somebody employed at or connected with the hospital would die suddenly because of it. And although those medical professionals are rational and scientific individuals by training and by nature, well, they're not entirely without our superstitious tendencies. Nurses at University College Hospital eventually developed expectations regarding the idea that Beck's painting had somehow become cursed. What grew to become a long-term tradition, it was a solemn duty of the incoming night shift nurses to cover up the painting when beginning their watch for the evening. Their daytime counterparts would uncover it first thing the following morning. Until the year 2001, when an opportunistic thief actually stole the painting. Now, you have to wonder where the thief hung the painting. Hopefully it wasn't above any place where they might sit or maybe fall asleep. The University College Hospital is also haunted by the ghost of a truly larger-than-life figure, the esteemed philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Among many other things, he was a renowned social and legal reformer, tried unsuccessfully to introduce a national prison that he intended to call the Panopticon. The idea never gained any real traction, but he was more successful in his efforts to father a bill that ultimately brought to life the Thames River Police Service. It's a band of maritime police officers that patrol the length of Britain's greatest river in pursuit of criminals. And throughout the course of his lifetime, Jeremy Bentham wrote millions of words that span a wide variety of subject areas. He was an acknowledged expert in the legal domain, that of the natural sciences and the philosophy in all its numerous forms. Most of the papers are preserved and archived at University College London to this day. One thing that just came to my attention, if you go to, and I'm looking at my iPhone, when it gives you the morning summary, you're looking at my picture. And if you tap on it, you can read about the ghost of Poveglia Island in Venice, Italy, and the hauntings of the Rolling Hills Asylum. Yes, the Ken Hudnall Show in all its glory is available numerous places on the internet, from Apple Podcast to Spotify, you name it, I'm probably there. Check it out. We got a new website coming up where you can actually interact with me while I'm on the air. Well, getting back to Jeremy Bentham, he was notoriously eccentric and prone to somewhat unusual turns of behavior. His future biographers concluded he may well have possessed a form of Asperger's. He was a colorful character, was well known around University College in London and its attached hospital for wearing distinctive white gloves and carrying a walking stick. And each walking stick had its own individual name. At the time of his death, his last walking stick went by the name of Dapple. We had a highly specific, unique, in fact, some say macabre, sense of what he wanted to happen to his body after his death. That death took place at his London home, June 6, 1832. He asked that in the presence of his friends, his corpse was to be scientifically dissected and turned into what became known at the time as an autocon. That's essentially a mummified body such as a taxidermist might create. In fact, his will is now kept at the British National Archives, and there's one extract of that will that I think is quite interesting. He said, "My body I give to my dear friend, Dr. Southwood Smith, to be disposed of in the manner hereinafter mentioned, and I direct he'll take my body under his charge and take the requisite and appropriate measures for the disposal and preservation of the several parts of my bodily frame in the manner expressed in the paper annexed to this will, and at the top of which I've written auto-icon. Skeleton he will cause to be put together in such a manner as that the whole figure may be seated in a chair, usually occupied by me when living, in the attitude in which I'm sitting when engaged in thought in the course of time employed in writing. I direct the body thus prepared shall be transferred to my executor, and he'll cause the skeleton to be clad in one of the suits of black occasionally worn by me. The body so clothed together with the chair and the staff in my later years borne by me." He's talking about his cane, by the way. "He will take charge of, and for containing the whole apparatus he'll cause to be prepared in a appropriate box or case, and it'll cause it to be engraved in conspicuous characters on a plate to be affixed thereon, and also on the labels on the glass case in which the preparations of the soft parts of my body be contained. He wanted his name and linked with the letters obvious, followed by the day of his demise. If it should so happen, his personal friends and other disciples should be disposed to meet together on some day or days of the year for the purpose of commemorating the founder of the greatest happiness system of morals and legislation, my executor will from time to time cause to be conveyed to the room in which they meet the said box or case in which the contents thereon to be stationed in such part of the room as to the assembled company shall seem meet. He signed this at Queen Square Place, Westminster, Wednesday, 30th May of 1832. Well, 2 days after his death, his body was indeed cut up in the manner he requested. The preserved skeleton was dressed in one of Benham's best suits, stuffed with hay in order to fill out its appearance somewhat, given gloves, and posed in a seated position with Dapple resting between his knees. Unfortunately, something went wrong with Jeremy Bentham's head during the process of preservation. The finished product, complete with glass eyes stuck into the sockets, eyes that he carried around with him in his pockets during the last few years of his life, wouldn't looked out of place in a horror movie. The head is so grotesquely zombie-like it regularly unnerved visitors to the college. So the decision was made to replace it with a wax substitute that looked far more lifelike and natural. I can't talk. College students throughout the world are notorious for their love of playing practical jokes and pranks, and this tendency came to a head, if you'll pardon the expression, in 1975 when students from a rival college kidnapped Jerry Bentham's desiccated head and held it for ransom. The ransom was duly paid to the kidnapper's selected charity, and the head was returned safely to its home at University College. But further kidnapping attempts ensued, including one memorable incident in which the head was used for football practice. It's now kept safely under lock and key by college authorities, officially classified as human remains. They can only be viewed by visitors under rare and exceptional circumstances. It's now prominently displayed in the South Cloisters section of the main college building, where it greets visitors. His autocon has become such a popular object of curiosity that University College in London has created a way for the public to view it online. The virtual autocon allows you to rotate around the mummy in a full circle and view it from multiple angles. If you're curious and like to take a look for yourself, take the virtual tour. The number of other tall tales have sprung up about the autocon throughout the years, and the most popular one, it sometimes attends meetings of the college council, wherein typically British display of dry humor. He said to be present but not voting, as it were. Well, he's used to cast a tie-breaking vote. He said to always vote in favor of the motion being presented. All this makes for a wonderfully colorful tale, and reality, the administration of University College in London denies this ever actually happens. The bizarre and fascinating afterlife of Jerry Bentham isn't restricted to just his physical remains, though. Great man's ghost has been seen and heard in the corridors of both University College and the hospital that bears his name. In his classic book, Haunted London, Peter Underwood reports that Bentham's last walking stick, Dapple's been heard tapping through the corridors on winter evenings, along with his heavy footfalls on the tiles. His ghost also gets the blame for moving objects around without apparent rhyme or reason in one of the classrooms. And Underwood went on to recount the tale of mathematics minister Neil King, who once heard the sounds of Dapple tapping its way toward his classroom one night. Curiously, he stuck his head out into the corridor and came face to face with the ghost of Jeremy Bentham, working his way toward the mathematics classroom. Ghost seemed to be completely unaware of the flesh and blood teacher's presence, but at the last moment, the form seemed to suddenly dart forward and throw itself bodily at the teacher. Now, there was no sensation of impact, and King realized that all sight and sound of Bentham had disappeared. But let me say this about that without fear of contradiction. A ghost jumping at you will definitely get your attention. Staff at University College in London has also encountered the apparition of Bentham, once again happening upon his distinctive form as it roams the corridors and hallways, sometimes following the startled employees as they go about their daily business. Bentham sometimes waves dapple at them. Whether trying to simply attract their attention or to convey some kind of message to them is impossible to say. It would seem that he's enjoying his afterlife and he is being every bit as eccentric and active and dead as physical life was when he was alive. Yet certainly something to consider as you wander the darkened halls of some of those massive buildings after dark. Well, let's turn to Yorktown, Texas. Discuss the Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Now, it's located about 75 miles southeast of San Antonio in the picturesque city of Yorktown. It's a small, friendly town, home to a little more than 2,000 people. It's founded in 1848, named after a famous Indian fighter named Captain John York, although the city's most famous son is undoubtedly Harlan Block, a U.S. Marine who was pictured raising the Stars and Stripes on Iwo Jima in one of the 20th century's most iconic photographs. You know, the photograph that we see is actually a recreation of the original raising of the flag. You know, constructed in 1950 and opened in 1951, the Yorktown Memorial Hospital was a shining example of what can be achieved when the public collectively comes together in the service of the greater good. Prior to 1951, Yorktown residents and those from the surrounding towns who are either sick or injured were forced to drive at least 30 miles in order to seek treatment, sometimes dying along the way if their condition was serious enough. Seeing the need for a hospital facility closer to home, Yorktown area residents and the Felician Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church conducted a politely aggressive fundraising campaign in order to raise the money needed to fund a facility in their own city. Well, they put out a fundraising pamphlet distributed to local businesses and citizens in 1949. It said, "Many hands must toil and all their efforts be combined before this beautiful building becomes in actuality the Yorktown Memorial Hospital." And it went on to say it can't be completed through the work and determination of a few. Even their great sacrifice will be a puny offering toward the great job to be done. And Yorktown has determined the project, a memorial to the war dead of two great conflicts, shall be speedily finished. The task belongs to each of us, and the burden of responsibility and accomplishment likewise is ours. Well, land was donated for the hospital, and sizable cash donations are made by the Felician Sisters, as well as the charitable arm of the Ford Motor Company. Numerous private citizens and small business owners contributed money to what became a landmark community project. Full capacity, the hospital could handle 21 admitted patients and also had a number of specialist capabilities, such as obstetrics and gynecological services devoted to delivering babies. There's also a state-of-the-art X-ray suite, well supplanted by a larger competing hospital. Yorktown Memorial finally closed its doors for good in 1987. It had served the public for the better part of 36 years. Estimates vary on just how many patients died inside its walls during that time, with the best approximation somewhere around 2,000, according to general practice physicians who worked there. Well, as you might guess, the hospital building didn't stand idle for long, converted to be used as a drug and alcohol rehabilitation clinic. The state was soon forced to close down, though, due to one too many reports of its uncontrollable patients causing problems. That's according to the Rush Haunted Tour. A triple stabbing, a double murder, supposedly took place in the basement of the rehab facility. Female drug treatment counselors romantically involved with two men, but reports vary as to whether both were patients or one was the patient and the other was a colleague. Whatever was the case, one of the other males found the two members of this love triangle together in the basement, and in a fit of rage stabbed them both, killed the woman and wounded the man. Fighting for his life, the man had been stabbed, grappled with his would-be killer, managed to get the knife out of his grasp, and stabbed him to death in return. Bloodstains are said to be the remnant of that violent, sordid knife frenzy can still be seen today, splattered across the brick walls of the basement. Although things are not quite as they seem when it comes to the blood, in the spring of 2011, investigators from the Golden Crescent Paranormal Research Group, don't you love these high-sounding names, locked themselves inside the Yorktown Memorial Hospital in an attempt to uncover some of its secrets. And so impressed were they with the results that Golden Crescent would return to Yorktown 5 more times in total. The group founder investigator Rob Calzada remained skeptical of some of the ghost lore surrounding the hospital, in particular the tale regarding the murders down in the basement. During an interview, he said that our historical research couldn't validate the murders in the basement ever actually took place. They had examined as much documentation as possible in trying to uncover evidence of the murder, but to no avail. Police department said they knew nothing about it. It would appear to be an urban legend. But what about the bloodstains in the basement? Well, they went in there, got a cotton swab, took a sample of it down to the police station to get it tested, and determined it was actually animal blood. And it wasn't long before Rob was hearing disembodied voices with his own ears as the team started to investigate the haunted basement. Calzada was all by himself at one end, and all his colleagues clustered at the opposite end of the hallway. As he was picking up a camcorder, he had briefly sat down on the floor. He felt what he described as a cobwebby sensation on his skin. All alone and shrouded in absolute darkness. He was startled to hear a voice located directly behind his ear say one word, Rob. As his fellow investigators quickly converged on his position, that same voice said in a foreign language, the specifics of which Calzada couldn't identify. He said it sounded like German or Italian or something like that, but it definitely sounded like it wanted him to leave. Well, a photograph taken of Rob at the time showed an unusual light anomaly positioned directly next to him. And he finds the combination of the cobweb sensation, the light anomaly, and the voice to be very persuasive evidence of paranormal forces at work in the basement of Yorktown Memorial. Hospital legend has it the basement's haunted by a kindly ghost nicknamed Papa. Nobody ever could find his real name. The story goes that Papa was once a maintenance worker at Yorktown Memorial, and though no one could uncover reports of his ghost actually making an appearance, the disembodied whistling is frequently heard down in the basement is usually attributed to him. Digital voice recorders left running in the empty basement overnight by the Ghost Adventures team during their lockdown at Yorktown Memorial recorded what sounds exactly like the plaintive wail of the woman in distress, as though she's crying out in either pain or despair. Investigator Jason Arnold of Contact Paranormal Research tells a different version of the basement murder story. According to Jason, the female was named Debbie, a nurse who just happened to be escorting 2 patients down to the rehab area in the basement one day when one of them suddenly jerks out a knife. Both Debbie and the other patient are supposedly stabbed repeatedly, and the rest of the story is consistent with what we've already discussed. Debbie and her attacker died at the scene. This, of course, is just a variation of the story, but in this case, there's no love triangle aspect to the story. The truth remains unclear, and probably always will. Now, the fact that the police didn't have a report is not surprising, as most facilities like this, with a murder, they do try to sanitize it before reporting it. Well, there have been many truly unique and bizarre haunting locations and investigated, and we did a lot of them here in El Paso. But what you'll find in Yorktown Memorial is something very unique in the annals of hauntings. They have a guard donkey, a walking, kicking security system used to roam the grounds at Yorktown Memorial. Spirit Yorktown rose to popularity after soldering up to Zach Baggins and the Ghost Adventures crew during their lockdown at Yorktown Memorial. Became something of a minor internet celebrity. In fact, Spirit has his own Facebook page in which he lists his job as security for the hospital. And when describing his relationship status, he says it's complicated. Well, Spirit's life story had a sad and tragic ending and was fatally poisoned by a person or persons unknown. His remains are buried close to Mike's trailer. And we'll talk about that shortly. You have to wonder where the spirit has remained behind to guard the Yorktown Memorial Hospital campus for as long as it remains standing. During a September 2011 interview with journalist Roberto Ontiveros, the hospital's owner, real estate broker, and attorney Phil Ross, said he originally bought the place as a potential warehouse, but it didn't take long for the reports of paranormal occurrences to start piling up. A team of psychic investigators that Ross asked to investigate the hospital soon assaulted with the sensation of being choked by invisible hands and exposed to all sorts of violent imagery and disturbing things. In regard to some of the earthbound spirits that she encountered during a visit to Yorktown Memorial Hospital, Ontiveros' article quotes local paranormal investigator Joe Marks Rivera. Every town has them, folks. One of them kept telling them to get the F out of there, and when we talked to him, we understood he was trying to warn them. He'd been butchered by a doctor, and that name was not understandable, during a thyroid operation, was trying to help him stay safe and get out of the building. Now, of course, there are two sides to every story, and it'd be unfair to tarnish a physician's reputation based on the wording of a ghost without more in the way of tangible evidence. But that particular doctor, whose name has been redacted, also referred to by the Russell Rush Haunted Tour as one of the resident ghosts that haunts the Yorktown Memorial. He died shortly after his retirement. His shadowy apparition was seen walking past the doorway of the physician's lounge on at least one occasion by one of his astonished flesh and blood colleagues. Dr. Gordon Barth, a general practice physician who has the distinction of not only practicing medicine at Yorktown Memorial but also was born there, said, I couldn't see a face, I couldn't see the details, but I saw a silhouette that made me think it was him. When I got up and looked again, he was gone. Well, every time Barth took a nap in the lounge after that, he'd check the corridors first to make sure nobody was standing there. Well, other witness testimony from doctors and other healthcare providers is usually given great weight by paranormal investigators. Medical professionals such as this tend to be well educated and have strong critical thinking skills, a keen eye for detail, and also capable of keeping their heads in a crisis. But Dr. Barth isn't only a believer in ghosts and the paranormal, but he admits he experienced a number of strange events at Yorktown Memorial he cannot explain. Rob Calzada of Golden Crescent Paranormal believes that he and his teammates, accompanied by Mike the caretaker, whose trailer sits on the property, may have run into the spirit of this particular doctor during their pre-investigation walkthrough of the building. And strangely, this encounter with an almost full-body male apparition happened during broad daylight. They were at the other end of the hallway and looked down toward the doctor's lounge, and he had a complete unobstructed view of the corridor. They looked down the hall and actually saw a doctor in a white coat walk away from the emergency room into the doctor's lounge. Whoever this was had on a white coat, no legs, and the head was blurred. Well, Mike and the investigator looked at each other and didn't have any equipment because the investigation hadn't started yet. They immediately compared notes and found out they both had seen the same thing. The sun was out and they both saw him as clear as day. You could clearly make out this was a doctor in a lab coat. And this is where the ghost of that particular doctor's always been seen. Well, the only thing, even though the apparition appeared solid like a flesh and blood person, there was some degree of transparency. You could see through the lab coat. The head was fuzzy. Probably the single most impressive experience they had at Yorktown Memorial. Paranormal investigator Susan Wallner, founder of the Final Dimension Paranormal Team, has been to Yorktown Memorial many times. So many times, in fact, she lost count. She said it's a great place for her to train new investigators because either make them or break them real quick. One of the first of many visits to Yorktown Memorial, Susan was conducting some flashlight experiments in the office of this particular doctor. It's located on the first floor near to the entrance lobby. For those who might not be familiar with this particular technique, flashlight experimentation involves requesting any spirit present to manipulate a flashlight in order to answer questions, turning it on or off in some agreed-to pattern, and such as one flash for yes and two for no. It's a very simple technique that sometimes yields fascinating results. Susan and her fellow investigators used multiple flashlights, which were necessary in order to rule out mechanical issues and as the cause of the lights flashing. And they were able to get yes and no answers to a lot of their questions. But the apparitions seen in the hospital weren't just restricted to just those of doctors. There was a ghost of a former lab technician named Jacobs, been sighted in that same area as that of the white-coated doctor, walking past the physician's lounge and passing through the lab area in which he once ran tests during his lifetime. It's only fitting, given the family's close ties with the Felician Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church, that a ghostly nun wearing a dark habit's been seen drifting through the now deserted corridors. Yorktown Memorial's hospital tour coordinator and overall groundskeeper is Mike, as I said. He lives in a trailer on the grounds and spends a great deal of time there. So you'd expect Mike to be the authority on whether the old hospital is haunted or not. He told Zach Baggins unequivocally the hospital had ghosts, the good kind and the bad kind as well. Mike related paranormal attacks taking place there when people got slapped and punched and kicked. Scratching and choking by unseen assailants is another common and frightening occurrence, happening most often upstairs in what became known as the Nuns' Lounge or the Nuns' Corridor. Investigators and visitors have pointed out through the years that quite a few of the attacks seem to center on people who have tattoos or other bodily markings. Maybe some remnant of the nuns who used to work in that area still disapproves of the manner in which those uninvited visitors have chosen to adorn their bodies. Investigator Susan Wallner doesn't buy that tattoo theory, though. She said, I've seen and been with plenty of people who have tattoos and plenty that don't. Same things happen to either way. So I don't think that's a deciding factor. It seems to me the more respect we show in that area, the more evidence and communication we tend to get. A clear-cut example of be careful what you wish for, one paranormal investigator was asking one of the child spirits that haunts the hospital, a young girl by the name of Stacy, by the way, to make her presence known to him and give him a sign of her existence. According to a ghost hunter named Jason Arnold, Stacy was a patient at the hospital, unfortunately passed away there from unknown causes. Following a high-pitched, childlike giggle, a rock was hurled directly at the surprised investigator, who, quite understandably, left the building at great speed. Well, Jason's story is further corroborated by Susan Wallner, who believes she's actually seen Stacy make an appearance once, crossing the basement hallway. Things turned from the lighthearted to dark very quickly one night when Susan and her team were trying to communicate with the spirit of this young girl. It seemed like she was communicating with Stacy through the ghost box. And everything went great for a few minutes, then another voice came through that was certainly not the little girl and threatened them. They could hear the girl cry at the same time. So she demanded to leave Stacy alone, let her talk to him, and he didn't cooperate. So then she called on Doug, and he said, who's another ghost. And he seemed to have been able to get her to safety. Very bizarre event, one that will not soon be forgotten. According to Rob Calzada, Stacy spends most of her time up on the first floor. Also been known to venture down into the basement. He talked about one incident in which he and another investigator were at the bottom of the basement stairs getting ready to climb up, and they'd been talking to one another in hushed tones with a digital voice recorder running in the background. When the audio files were recorded after the investigation, a childlike voice could be heard mimicking their words and mannerisms, repeating them back in the way that young children often seem to find amusing. One of the most frequently reported ghosts is that of a man named Doug Richards, a heavy equipment mechanic who died in 1973. He sometimes appears on demand, as a pair of shocked investigators found out once when they were called out to him by name in one of the corridors. Only see a large shadow figure, the figure, they said, of a very, very large man crossing at the end of the hallway. Well, Mike has conducted quite a few electronic voice phenomena experiments with Doug and claims this particular spirit has even gotten right up in Mike's face and waved his fingers just inches from his eyes. According to Mike, he's as curious about us as we are about him. He said he asked him where do you hang out mostly, and he says in the basement. And Mike also captured a Class A EVP. That's electronic voice phenomena, don't you know? Class A means that's one of the highest quality and clarity, which followed the request for Doug to state his own name. And the voice on the tape is quite clear when it says Doug. Well, Susan Wallner has her own thoughts about Doug. She said, Doug's without a doubt my absolute favorite resident. Nobody seems to know where he came from at all, but only found him in the basement. I've been told he only calls 2 people by name, and I'm lucky enough to be one of them. She said we've caught multiple EVPs where I can address him and ask him if he knows who I am or if can say my name, and he does more often than not. And when I asked that he say his name for us, so I know who we're talking to, he replied with a recorded EVP or on the ghost box. She said, I tend to consider him my protector when I'm there as well, because if something happened one night when we were there, I was down in the hall of the basement, and a group of 4 investigators at the other end of the hall in the laundry room using the ghost box. When the investigators called out to Susan to get down there because her name kept coming up with the box. And when she did, she started asking questions to see who it was. And nothing came through, so she got a bit aggravated and said something to the extent of, you get me down here and you stop talking. Are you scared now that I'm here? Well, the room temperature, fellas, dropped about 15 degrees. It went even darker than it had been. And it spit out the words, F you, bitch. Needless to say, she was immediately shaken. And suddenly a different voice came through and said, Susan, leave. And, of course, they got out of there fast. That's the first of only 2 instances she's ever needed to step outside of the hospital to gather her bearings. 3 of the 4 investigators that were there, and when it happened, actually left, refusing to go back into the building. They didn't even go back in to get their personal belongings. And she said she's also seen Doug. She had a group of people with her in the basement that had never been in the hospital before. And she was telling them all about Doug and the things that he had done for him in the past, and she asked him to please come out and meet her friends who had come to meet him. After a few requests, a few minutes, across the end of the hall walked a full-bodied, dark human shape that looked to be very broad, no shorter than 6'5". It was amazing, she said. She thanked him, of course, and from the same area where they saw the shadow across the hall, the sound came as if to respond. Well, when interviewed, Susan seemed almost nostalgic and protective of this harmless hospital ghost, telling the interviewer she likes to return as often as possible to visit with him. Came across in much the same way she might speak of a distant but much missed relative, for whom she obviously had great affection. Well, she's the proud owner of a Class A EVP recording. That's the rarest type of EVPs you know. One that's so clearly, distinctly a human voice that skeptics can't simply write it off as background noise or meaningless static. When asking Doug specifically to speak his name into the digital voice recorder, he received a clear, distinct response of Doug. She regards this as the most impressive piece of evidence she has received at Yorktown Memorial, because the group that she had in that room with her was just totally floored at how fluid it was, how comfortable the environment was, and to get to see someone else was there with us that we couldn't see. To them, that was the holy grail of ghost hunting, if you will. Rob Calzada and his colleagues may have also encountered the ghost of Big Doug Richards when they were down in the hospital basement. They were gathering up some infrared camera equipment they'd previously left down there, and a female investigator looked down toward the end of the gloomy corridor where she saw what she described as a darker-than-dark mass standing there, simply looking at her. It was an estimated 6 foot 6 inches in height and the shape of a human body. Well, the incredulous ghost hunter quickly gathered up the equipment and ran back upstairs. During the course of their lockdown, Zach Baggins and the Ghost Adventures investigators captured on camera what appears to be the shadowy form lurking in one of the corridors. The figure was also seen with Baggins' own eyes. Now, with most ghostly figures that later appear on camera are not seen at the time the photographs are taken, and the sudden spikes in electromagnetic energy followed almost immediately. Jason Arnold and his colleagues, Angela, Kathy, and Thomas from the Houston-based Contact Paranormal Research Team, investigated the old Yorktown Memorial Hospital several nights in 2014. They said it was one of the most active places they'd ever seen. The crew from Contact Paranormal varied their research methods by mixing up the number of investigators in the building at various times, on some occasions going so far as to have only one person in the building alone. Well, the first night they were there, they were setting up at base camp, according to Jason. One of our investigators saw a gray shadow mass pass in front of the chapel. Later on, they discovered that was the figure that's called the Gray Man. For the first hour of the investigation, Jason was keeping vigil outside the priest's quarters down in the basement. Was fortunate enough to hear the sound of 3 disembodied footsteps in the area. He saw a blue light coalesce in the same place just outside the entrance doorway. Clustered upstairs in the chapel and the area set aside for delivering babies, the rest of the team experienced nothing even remotely as memorable. I can't talk. But they had no way of knowing that ultimately the Yorktown Memorial was not going to disappoint them. On the first night, it felt like an abandoned hospital, dusty and dark with a slight smell of mildew, but when they showed up the second night, it felt like it was alive, like they woke it up the night before. Heavy feeling in the air that gave you a sense of unease. A few investigators felt as if they were being watched. They'll notice the atmosphere inside that ramshackle old building felt different on the second night of their 48-hour visit, when they had fewer investigators inside. It was quiet at first, they said, but slowly became more active as the evening wore on. Something inevitable and invisible, nothing was caught on the video monitor, was heard to slide across the hallway with only one investigator being present in the building. Unbeknownst to this brave individual, the sound of footsteps was recorded coming up the staircase at that very same time. Investigator didn't hear those footsteps when they were happening, finding out only on playing and reviewing back the digital sound recordings. As evidence goes, this particular EVP is more impressive by the fact that it was caught not only on digital voice recorders, but also on the feed from the camera that was covering that particular corridor. A corridor in which absolutely nothing was seen to be moving that could account for those sounds. Well, unfortunately, we come to the end of today's show and this week's shows. We've run out of time. We'll be back on Monday. And once again, we'll be talking about the strange and the unusual. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening and a great weekend.